Welcome to Mrin Talks, my vlog where I take you through the steps of investing. In this vlog, I'm going to be talking about the fund fact sheet. Normally, investors really don't like to do too much of research. They find it very cumbersome. But it is really important that before you start investing, you need to look at the fund fact sheet, which has a plethora of information on how a fund is managed, and the fact sheet is disclosed on a monthly basis. You can find it on the website of the mutual fund very easily. The fund fact sheet actually gives an overview of the mutual fund, and for example, it has information on what is the fund objective. So what is the fund trying to achieve? What is the nature of the fund manager details, the experience of the fund manager, what are the other funds the fund manager has managed, what has been the performance of those particular funds. Of course, the fund fact sheet also talks about the benchmark index, which is so very important for you to figure out whether this is a scheme that is doing investments in large caps or mid caps, or if it's on the debt side, whether it is following investing in gilts or it is investing in corporate bonds. And then the fund fact sheet has information about the corpus size. More importantly, the fund fact sheet also details the riskometer of the fund, and the riskometer of the fund is a good way for investors to figure out what is the risk element in a particular scheme. So is the risk high, moderately high, balanced, or it is low? Finally, as a part of the scheme features, the fund fact sheet also talks about the entry and the exit loads that are applicable to the particular scheme. Now, the fund fact sheet also details the portfolio strategy, that means the investment style. It also tells you about the industry and the sector allocations, which is very important because it gives you a good idea in terms of what are the sectoral exposures, are they too concentrated in nature. Similarly, for debt funds, the fact sheet would tell you what is the credit profile of a fund, because it would detail the holdings in AAA rated bonds and AA rated bonds and so on and so forth. Hence, the fact sheet gives you a lot of comprehensive information on the scheme features, what is the portfolio looking like, and of course the past performance. So typically you could get information about past performance, that is if you've invested through SIP or you've invested through lump sum across time frames, and you would find that there would be a comparison of the fund's returns along with the benchmark. Of course, you also have information on the expense ratio, which is so important, because the expense ratio has a direct impact on the returns that you make as an investor. So both the expense ratios, the direct as well as the regular plan expense ratios are mentioned in the fund fact sheet. Coming to some specific information that's available, as far as debt funds are concerned, the fact sheet would mention the average maturity. So the average maturity means that this is the time that is required for all the debt holdings in the portfolio to mature. And the modified duration is a measure of the price sensitivity of the debt portfolio to change in interest rates. So for example, if the duration is mentioned 3 years, and if the interest rates fall by 1%, then the NAV of the fund is actually going to rise by 3%. So essentially, modified duration helps in assessing the interest rate risk. You also have the yield to maturity, which is basically the total returns that the investor will earn from interest payment and annualized gain or losses if held up to maturity. Apart from the credit profile, you also have a breakup of the types of instruments that are held by the scheme. So for example, as far as debt schemes are concerned, is it commercial paper, is it certificate of deposit, is it NCDs, is it bonds, is it gilts, or is it in cash? Typically, investors in shorter duration debt funds like liquid funds, ultra short-term funds, short-term debt funds should check whether a higher allocation has been made to shorter term instruments like CPs and CDs. And longer term instruments like gilts and long term bonds are typically meant for long duration funds. In terms of the ratios, there are many ratios which are mentioned in the fund fact sheet. The first being the portfolio turnover ratio. So, what does this mean? It is the percentage of the fund's holdings that have changed in a given year, which means that it really measures the trading activity in a fund. And obviously, if the portfolio turnover ratio is very high, it means that the portfolio is being churned a lot, and a lower turnover ratio of 30 to 50% is always better. Secondly, you have the expense ratio, which is the cost of managing the fund. Clearly, the expense ratio being high means that it's really going to eat into your returns. The third ratio mentioned is beta, and beta is nothing but the fund's volatility compared to the benchmark. If a fund has a beta of 1.5, it means that for every 10% upside or downside, the fund's NAV would be move 15% in the respective direction. Ideally, beta below 1 is considered good. The next ratio is the standard deviation, which basically measures the volatility of a fund vis-a-vis its average. It tells you how much a fund deviates from its historical mean return. So the higher the number, it means that the fund is going to be more volatile, which means you ideally want to look at a fund where the standard deviation is low. Then you have the Sharpe ratio. The Sharpe ratio basically is a measure of risk adjusted return, which means that it measures that for the given volatility in the scheme, how has the fund performed. So the higher the Sharpe ratio, the better is the performance. Of course, remember that all of these ratios cannot be looked alone, right? You do need to, the ratios are always looked in comparison to other fund ratios. So if you are comparing two funds, it's a good idea to look at the fact sheets to understand and see both the funds compare in terms of costs, in terms of all of these volatility ratios, in terms of the credit profile of this scheme, concentration risk, which can be assessed through the sector and the company holdings as well. The fund fact sheet is actually one of the best guides containing all information to analyze the fund and take informed decisions for retail investors. So don't forget to check out the fund fact sheet before you decide to invest into a fund. Make sure you click on the bell icon to subscribe. We do look forward to your feedback. Till then, cheers.